I've been working on something behind the scenes for a while now, kind of like a literal case study on my last relationship with a highly narcissistic person. Not in a detached clinical sort of way, but like I lived this, I've tracked this, I watched this unfold in real time for 4 years kind of way, literally. And something clicked for me recently that I haven't really heard people explain like this before. He didn't just try to control me. He weaponized control as a form of safety. And I know that sounds backwards because when you're on the receiving end of it, it feels like anything but safe. It feels suffocating and confusing. But from his perspective, control wasn't about power just for the sake of power. It was about preventing loss. Because underneath all of it, like underneath the manipulation, the inconsistency, the emotional distance, there seemed to be this core belief: if she really knows me, she'll leave. And that belief wasn't surface level, it wasn't logical, it appeared that it was primal. So instead of building connection, he tried to build containment. Like if he could control the narrative, control my reactions, control how close I got or didn't get, control how much I saw or didn't see, then maybe he could control whether or not I stayed. And that's where things got really twisted, because what he was doing to avoid abandonment was actually guaranteeing it. But in his mind, control felt safer than actual vulnerability, because vulnerability meant risk, and risk to him meant annihilation. And this is the part that really opened my eyes. He didn't see his behavior as something that he was doing or like anything he could actually control, I guess. He saw it like as who he was. Like it was his identity. The mask, the lying, the deflection, the bravado, the manipulation, that wasn't something that he put on. That was who he was through and through. So when I would call something out, when I would say, hey, this behavior isn't okay, what he was hearing was, you are not okay. And that's one reason there was so much defensiveness and so much distortion. Because if the mask gets rejected, then in his mind, he gets rejected. And I think this is where we sometimes get stuck in these dynamics, because you start trying to separate the two. You're like, no, I'm not rejecting you. I'm rejecting what you're doing. But if someone doesn't have that internal separation, they literally cannot understand what you're saying. It just like, it all collapses into one thing. And this is what I was doing without even realizing it at the time. I was holding up a mirror. I was saying, this is what you're doing, and this is not who you are. Your behavior doesn't have to define your identity, because you can always change your behavior. Which, I mean, on paper, that sounds right. I mean, when you say that, yeah, it makes perfect sense. But here's the reality. That kind of reflection, it creates like a crack between the identity and the behavior. And that crack, that's where the change could happen if the person were to embrace it, right? But it's also where the fear lives, because if he steps into that space, he has to face the possibility that everything he's been using to survive isn't actually him. Which it's not, but that was a terrifying concept for him. Like, imagine believing that the only way you learned how to function in relationships, thinking you're showing up is who you are, is actually not who you are. That's a little destabilizing to consider. So people, sometimes in that situation, they'll just double down. They'll cling even harder to the mask. They lean even further into control, because at least it's familiar. At least it feels like something solid, even if it's destroying the very thing they're trying to hold on to. And that's the paradox. They want connection, closeness, to be chosen. But the very strategies they use to feel safe push people away. And while I could see that the mask was exactly that, just a mask, I could see that there was something underneath it, something real, something that wasn't manipulative or controlling. But I mean, me seeing that was and could never be enough. He has to be willing to separate who he is from what he's been doing. And if he were to do that, it would take away the excuse that he could use of, but this is just who I am, right? He has to be willing to drop the mask. And not everyone is ready for that. Not everyone even wants that. And that doesn't make anybody wrong for seeing the potential or the real person beneath it. But it does mean that you can't build a relationship on it, because potential isn't something you can interact with. You know, it's behavior is the only thing you can actually interact with. And if the behavior never changes, then the outcome doesn't either. So yeah, when I say he used control as safety, I mean that he literally, like, it was the only way he knew how to keep something that he was convinced he was going to lose anyway. And that's not love. That's fear wearing a costume of control.